Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started to be respectful of everyone's time. I do want to share that this meeting is being recorded, so anything that you say will be on the recording. Please make sure that your mics are on mute. I am available during the presentation. I also have a couple of counselors who will be monitoring the chat to answer any questions as they pop up. But throughout the presentation, please keep yourself on mute. If you'd like to ask your question out loud, we can save that for the end of the presentation. Otherwise, please just put that in the chat and Ms. Hoaglander or Ms. Lehman will be happy to answer for you. So on today's agenda, I'm going to introduce the counseling department. I also want to go over the registration process and kind of explain what it is. I'll also walk you through the registration timeline. We'll be talking about course selection for a rising 12th grader. With that being said, if you do not have a rising senior, then this is probably not the meeting for you. We have all of the other ones and recordings up on the counseling website already. We'll talk about the types of courses at Milton. I will show you where the course catalogs and resources are. We will go over the schedule change process at Milton, and then I will share important dates and our social media with you. So to get started, this is our team. My name's Tiffany Popwell. I'm the head counselor. I would show you on camera, but I actually came home early to avoid the weather. So I'm at home and I would like to not put my camera on, but this is what I look like. I am the dual enrollment coordinator. I'm the MTSS coordinator. I take care of all the graduation coach duties, and then I take care of the administrative duties for our counseling department. And the reason that I have all of these duties and not a caseload is so that all of the other counselors can focus primarily on working directly with students and parents and not feel that they're bogged down with any other outside activities or requirements. So with that being said, Ms. Lehman has all of our students with the last names A through C. Ms. Hoaglander has students with the last names D through HOL. Ms. Bartley has my old caseload, which is HOM through MC. Ms. Rhodes got a few students that were on my old caseload as well. She now has MD through SAL. And Ms. Wilson has the end of the alphabet with SAM through Z. We also have a full-time school social worker now, which we've not had in the past, and we are extremely grateful for him, Mr. Damian Bentley. He's been a wonderful addition to our team. If you've had the opportunity to work with him, I'm sure you can attest to that. He is awesome. Ms. Solomon is our RTI, SST, and 504 coordinator at Milton. Ms. Amy Barr is over our records. Ms. Michelle Height is our registrar, and Ms. Maria Echeverria is our bilingual liaison, working primarily with Spanish-speaking families. So what is the registration process? What is registration? What is verification? This is essentially picking your courses for the next school year. And we understand that picking your courses for the upcoming year requires planning and thought. We want to make sure that you've met all of your graduation requirements on the counseling end, but we also want to make sure that you're picking classes that are a good match for you. We do follow a specific timeline for the course selection and registration process with time built in to make educated decisions. The final versions of your selections are saved by the school and kept on file to use as a reference regarding the student's original selections. So if at any point in time next school year, you're not sure what your student chose to take that year, we will pull those out and we will show you what you chose and what you signed off on. If you have any questions or concerns during the planning or registration process, please be sure to reach out to your assigned school counselor or use the resources provided later on in the presentation. So first I want to share the registration timeline. I think last year we did not share this well enough on the front end, so we want to be sure that everybody understands when and where these decisions need to be made. We want to make sure that everyone understands how long they have to make these decisions, and then when these decisions are due, and what it means if you don't participate in the process. So January 23rd through the 27th is the week that teachers will be making course recommendations for a student's core classes. This means that your student's current teachers are going to be having discussions with your student to talk about what they want for next year, and then also talk about what the teacher is going to recommend them for next year. A lot of times, those things don't line up. A student might want to take AP Lit next year, but the teacher doesn't see that the student is ready, and they might not recommend them for the AP course. There are a number of data points that teachers use to make those decisions. It goes a lot farther than, does the teacher like your student and did they get an A in the class? A lot of times there are certain criteria that an honors or AP student needs to meet. And those things look like, does your student advocate for himself or herself? As in, if your student's having a hard time in the coursework, is she going to go to the teacher and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this concept. Can I get help? Is your student going to attend tutoring to try and get better instead of letting it fall to the wayside and snowball into a bad grade? Does your student do their homework? Does your student do the readings if there's any reading required outside of the class? Things like, does your student participate well with others or in groups? If your student has an A in a class but doesn't meet a lot of these other criteria, then they might not be a good fit for an honors or AP class. The following week, January 30th through February 3rd, students are going to be making individual elective decisions during their advisement period. So every day that week during advisement, students are going to be sitting on Infinite Campus. They're going to be looking at their academic planner, and they're going to put in their choices for electives for the next school year. Then on February 6th, which is a Monday, students are going to receive their first verification form. We piloted this last year. It was a lime green form. Students were allowed to choose whatever classes they want. They could waive into AP classes. They could sign up for online classes. They really had the opportunity to let us know what time of day they wanted online classes. This is the schedule change period that everyone dreams of. It's free for all changes. The students can choose whatever in the world they want. This is the opportunity for a student to do that. We did realize last year that once students got those forms, we didn't have the capacity to hold the amount of meeting requests that we were receiving. Just to give you an idea, there's only 5 counselors that are holding a caseload, and when over 2,000 students want to have an individual academic advisement meeting with their parent in 5 days, it's just logistically not possible. So in an effort to be there for students so that we can advise them over their academics, we've built in 3 days that week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday, since they're getting their forms during advisement, we won't be in the media center for the first part of the day, but we will go down there at noon and stay there until 3:30. February 8th is a Wednesday. We will be there all day. And February 10th is a Friday. We will also be there all day. And this is meant to be just kind of a drive-by advisement period. So if a student has time between classes, or if a student gets done with their classwork with their teacher, they can say, hey, I really want to go ask a counselor a question. By putting ourselves in the media center, it makes sure that we're available to take walk-ins all day for these kinds of questions. This is for students only, so we do ask that parents don't show up to the building to participate. We're not going to be set up in a manner that allows us to have a confidential private conversation, but we are more than happy to have your student call you on the phone if you want to be a part of the conversation. We just ask, it's not really set up to be full on four-year planning meetings. This is quite literally just to talk about classes for the next year. If you want to have a four-year planning meeting with your counselor, you can go ahead and start reaching out to your assigned counselor and say, hey, I really want to talk through some classes with you. They're more than welcome to schedule those appointments with you. So you don't have to wait until the week of February 6th to talk about these things. The earlier, the better. And we're hoping that by sharing this information in January, before you get this form in February, you have enough time to get those meetings in, if you even want them. So once students get their verification form and they make all the changes that they want to it, they're going to turn that in on February 14th, which is a Tuesday. So another thing that we changed from last year students only had a Monday to a Friday to get their forms in. This year we've built in a weekend and 2 more school days so that if you really want to think about it, talk with your friends about it, because we know students want to take classes with their friends, there is a weekend built into that time. I do want to add a disclaimer that failure to submit your form indicates that you don't want to make any changes to the courses you're recommended for, and then you're waiving your right to make the free-for-all changes during that period. And it's fine if you like your classes. The goal is that by the time students get these forms, they have an idea and they've already picked their electives, so it shouldn't be too much of a shock to them. But if it is, that's why they can make whatever changes they want. Counselors will work on a quick timeline to get those changes processed, and then we will print a second verification, which is essentially a double check to say, hey, we saw all the changes you made on your green form. Here is your new form. Did we do this right for you? They'll receive that second verification form on February 20th, and it's intended to be proof that counselors made the requested changes. There are limited parameters for changes during this week. So instead of having the free-for-all to make whatever changes they want, we haven't quite decided what our parameters will be, but it will probably look like, if you thought about it again and you wanted to drop down from the AP class that you signed up for, you can do that. If you forgot to add an online class, we are going to allow students to add online classes still during the second round. So this really is meant to just be kind of a check to make sure we did it right the first time and not meant to be the free-for-all change period. The students will have 5 school days with that form. They'll turn them in on Friday, February 24th. And again, the disclaimer is that failure to submit a form indicates that you don't want to make any changes or that you're waiving the right to make changes. So they should be correct by that point. So when your student gets that purple form, it should already be correct. We would love for you to still sign it and turn it in, letting us know that it is correct. But again, if you don't turn one in at all and don't participate in the process, then we're just going to assume that it is correct. I do want to reiterate that verification forms are not schedules. There's been a lot of confusion this year, especially with the upperclassmen, juniors, and seniors, with saying that what they wrote on their form was the schedule that they told us, and that when they didn't get it exactly how they wanted it, that we're not delivering what we said we would. That's not the case. I think that what happens is we make sure that classes have seats in the student, we make sure that students have seats in the classes that they want, but we cannot promise that you'll have it in the period that you want it. And that's the issue that we were coming to this year, is that a student might want AP macro, but they also want to be out of the building all afternoon. Well, that's pretty much every senior wants all their classes in the morning and wants their afternoons off. So we can't ensure that you get them the period you want, but I can tell you we have tons of seats in our afternoon AP macro classes because we did make enough periods to hold all the students who wanted that class. So this is solely due to unforeseeable schedule conflicts. It's not something that the counselors are doing incorrectly on our end. It's not something that the students are doing incorrectly on their end. It all comes down to master scheduling. Essentially, the master schedule is created with every class that we want to offer in a schedule that can sustain a teacher's full workload, a break for a teacher, a lunch for a teacher, and sometimes those class periods just don't line up to give a student the perfect schedule. We do the best we can to work with them. A lot of times it ends up being offering an online period for a class that they wanted to have in person, and we know that that's not ideal. But the alternative is you can take the class in the period that you might not have preferred, but you still have a seat in that class. Like, we will still make sure that there are enough seats in those classes. This page is pretty long, but this is just intended to kind of help you see that where your student is now and then what they're likely to be recommended for next year. This is specific for juniors going into senior year. The way that the chart reads is that in 11th grade, if your student is in 11th American Lit, next year they are looking at multicultural lit. We are moving World Lit to be a senior level class. Your students have likely already taken World Lit in 10th grade, so you don't have to worry about this piece. This is just something that's going to phase in as a senior level class now. So if your student took World Lit last year, they're not eligible to take it again because it's the same class, just a little bit more rigorous for a senior. So you're looking at multicultural lit on level. If your student is currently in 11th American Lit, next year they will likely be recommended for AP Language and Composition, otherwise known as your AP Lang senior class. Again, if your student didn't take World Lit or Composition Honors, they could take that as a senior. A student who wouldn't have taken World Lit last year might have been a student who enrolled with us after their 10th grade year, and they might have just had a 10th grade Lit class. And it all comes down to course numbers and course titles, and we can look at that on an individual basis if you want to reach out to your assigned counselor. If your student is a little bit ahead and is already taking Multicultural Lit on level, then next year we are going to recommend that they take AP Lang Senior, or they can do College English through dual enrollment. If your student is currently taking Dramatic Writing, we would recommend that next year they take dual enrollment College English. If your student is currently an AP Lang senior, next year they can take AP Lit, which is called AP Literature and Composition, or they could also do dual enrollment for college English. If your student is currently taking AP Lit, then we would recommend doing dual enrollment college English. A student currently taking AP Lit, we assume has already had AP Lang American Lit and then is an AP Lit now. So we don't have any more AP English classes beyond that point, and that's why we would say dual enrollment. If your student is currently in 11th American Lit Honors or AP Lang American Lit, they can go to AP Literature and Composition, which is also known as AP Lit. For math, the progressions are changing, and this probably has the least effect on you as a student who's been here all year. I'm sorry, all 4 years of high school. So it's not too much of a change. If you want to see the flow charts from the Department of Education that have been modified to fit Fulton County, they're already posted on the counseling website. If you go to bit.ly/Milton Counseling and scroll down on the homepage, you can see those math flow charts. So if your student is currently in Algebra 2, next year they could be in pre-calculus, they could be in AMDM, which stands for Advanced Math Decision Making, or they could do dual enrollment math, which would typically be like a college pre-calculus or a college algebra. If your student is currently in pre-calculus honors or accelerated pre-calculus honors, next year they can take AP Calculus AB, they could take AP Calculus BC, AP Statistics, or they can do dual enrollment math. And if your student is ahead in math and is currently taking AP Calculus AB, AP Calculus BC, AP Statistics, or if they're already taking dual enrollment math, because we do have some juniors who start into the Georgia Tech math if they've already had AP Calculus BC, then next year the student could take AP Calculus BC, that would be for students who are currently in AB, or Georgia Tech math or another dual enrollment math. The biggest difference between AP Calculus AB and AP Calculus BC, the classes are essentially same, except for BC has 3 additional units, therefore they move at a faster pace. So if your student is currently taking AP Calculus AB and they want to take BC next year, they'll probably do pretty well in that class. So that's your math. Science, there are a ton of options because students have completely different pathways based on their needs, but we're trying to hit just the most generic pathways so that it doesn't feel as confusing because there are a lot of options and we're aware of that. And with more options come more problems and more confusion. But if your student is currently in environmental science, next year they could take Earth Systems, or I think we're going to try and offer an on-level human anatomy and physiology class. That does count as a Hope Rigor credit, and we're trying to add in another Hope Rigor course at Milton that's not an honors class, in hopes that some of our students who need that 4th rigor credit don't have to go into such a difficult science. If your student's in chemistry right now, we would recommend them for physics. If your student's in chemistry honors, they could take AP Environmental Science, they could take the honors version of the Human Anatomy and Physiology class, and if they successfully completed chemistry honors with a high grade, they could even go on to AP Physics. If your student is currently in on-level physics, next year they could go to AP Environmental Science. If your student is currently in AP Environmental Science, they could go on to AP Biology. If your junior is in AP Environmental Science and going to AP Biology, we are making that recommendation under the assumption that your student already took physical science, biology, and chemistry honors before the APES class that they're in right now. If your student is in AP Physics, then we would recommend them for AP Chemistry or AP Physics C. We do know that there are a ton of science classes. The biggest difference between what we allow students to go into has to do with the math background. Some of these classes require that you take not an accelerated, but a higher level math class concurrently so that you can do the math that's embedded in some of these science classes. So we do understand that there's probably a lot of questions that need to be answered on an individual basis. And I would recommend reaching out to your assigned counselor. And then a lot of times we speak with our science department chair to get help with some of those recommendations and kind of ask what needs to be done. For social studies, If your student is currently in AP US History, they can take AP Government next year, which is a semester-long class, and they could take an AP Economics class. We offer both microeconomics and macroeconomics. One semester of AP Economics is sufficient to meet the grad requirements. So in the past, students have had to take both, but now they can take one or the other. They will both fill the requirement. Your student can take both still if they want to. A student could take AP Micro in the fall and AP Macro in the spring, totally fine. If your student is currently in on-level US History, then they're looking at on-level Government for a semester and then an on-level Personal Finance and Economics for one semester. In the elective category, students have 2 elective periods that they have in their schedule. For the first elective, college-bound students would be entering year 2 or 3 of their world language. That's their sign language, Spanish, French, Latin, or Japanese. If your student plans to attend a 4-year college and has not taken a world language yet, if your student is currently a junior and not taking world language and wants to go to a 4-year college, your student would need to take 1 year of their world language this summer so that they could take the second year next school year. And that would be an added cost for you. You could take it through Fulton Virtual or Georgia Virtual because not most, all 4-year colleges require a minimum of 2 years in the same world language. So if your student has decided, I actually do want to go to a 4-year school, like Kennesaw State or Georgia State, and they haven't done a world language yet, that's something that you'll want to talk with your counselor about. How can I sign up for that this summer? And then plan on taking the second year next year. Your student can also take year 2 or 3 of a career tech pathway course, and the pathways are on page 5 of the Milton course catalog. For their second elective, students can take the required health and personal fitness if it hasn't already been taken. We do realize that online is the preferred method by upperclassmen since the class is primarily 9th graders in person, but we also know a lot of students are what's the word? I'm losing my word. We know that students, are ambitious and they kind of choose to take other classes instead of health and personal fitness in 9th grade. So we do have tons of students that push this to senior year, but by then it's kind of crunch time and you have to get those credits because they are required for graduation. You can still take those over the summer also if you don't want to make room in your schedule for it. Students can choose an additional career tech course, fine arts, PE. They could do a dual enrollment elective, they could do work-based learning, or they could do internship. I will share more information about dual enrollment, work-based learning, or internship in just a moment. Next, I want to touch on the types of courses that we offer at Milton. There are 4 types. We have in-person classes. We allow students to take them on Fulton Virtual. We allow students to take classes on GAVS, which is Georgia Virtual. And then we have dual enrollment, which is open primarily to juniors and seniors. And then there are some strict parameters around a 10th grader qualifying. So that would be something that you could talk to me about since I am over dual enrollment. Just to break everything down, the in-person courses are just that, they're face-to-face at the high school. If a student agrees to take a course in person, we are not going to permit them to move to online at any point after they've chosen to take that class. The same goes for the spring semester, after the spring semester or in the middle of the year. The reason that we don't allow changes back and forth is pretty simple. We hire teachers based on the number of seats that we think we're going to have. If 80 students say they want to take AP Psychology, then we make sure that we hire a teacher that can teach enough periods of AP Psychology to hold 80 students. We don't let students move to online after they've committed to an in-person class anymore because what was happening is students were mass exiting classes and the class sizes were going down super quickly. I can tell you as a former teacher, nothing productive happens in a class of 10 students. There's not really a lot that you can do with as far as group work. You don't have super productive conversations because there are just not a ton of perspectives. From a student point of view, they don't like being in classes that small either because if they don't have a friend in that class, they dread going there every day. On the flip side, we don't let students move from online to in-person because we didn't allot a seat for that student. So that's how classes get overloaded. That's how classes start to get to 35, which is the cap that we have in majority of our core classes. If you've had a student in a class of 35, I'm sure they can tell you the classrooms get really hot, it's really loud, it's hard to focus. That has its own issues also. So we really are striving to keep students with the decisions that they make, and we are recording all of your choices so that we can always refer back to them. We recommend that students take the majority of their classes in person. Students are more successful when they have consistent access to a teacher. They're more successful when they form a deeper relationship with a teacher in person. They're able to access the after-school tutoring if they need that. They can come during advisement. School works best when it's face-to-face, but we do understand that if your student wants to take a virtual class, they can. I'm going to move on to share a little bit about the virtual classes. If your student decides to take virtual classes, they have to be taken at the beginning or the end of their school day. If they take more than one virtual class, they're going to be blocked together. We can do them bookend style. If your kid has two, we could put one in first period and one in seventh period. We could put them all in the morning, or we can put them all in the afternoon. We really, really try to avoid putting any online classes during the middle of the day because we don't have a designated space for students to work on their online classes in the building. We don't have a computer lab that they can go sit in. In the past, we've allowed students to stay in the cafeteria, but all that did was result in a cafeteria full of 200 students, only one adult, lots of roaming, behavior issues, safety issues. It's just not a good environment for students to work in. So we no longer allow students to stay on campus for their virtual class. We do understand that sometimes things happen and other classes, um, especially with seniors, they have classes that are harder to work around, so they might end up with a random online period in the middle of their school day. We do have one classroom in the building that's monitored that takes attendance that students can do, but we cap it at 30. So we really try to stray away from that, but when worse comes to worse, we do have a backup option. I do get the question a lot of what's the difference between Fulton Virtual and Georgia Virtual. The main difference is for Fulton Virtual, and this is a student favorite, is it's self-paced and it has fewer deadlines throughout the semester. This excites students. Students get starry-eyed at the thought of, oh, wow, I can work on it whenever I want and I don't have to stick to any parameters or anything. And a lot of times that exact factor is their downfall. There's a higher likelihood for procrastination. We see high stress toward the end of semester. We get a lot of emails from parents and students alike around November of, my student ignored this class for 3 months and now I want them out. Fulton Virtual is a completely separate school from Milton. They have their own parameters, they have their own rules. We can't really go in and make them give extensions. We can't make them grade faster or make them do things. So, we want to let everyone know on the front end that your student needs to be responsible. They need to pace themselves. They need to plan to hit certain checkpoints. My recommendation would be to hit the semester in thirds. Make sure you're 33% done by February, 60% done by April, and then you're finishing your class in May. So statistically, because students procrastinate more because they can, we see lower grades in Fulton virtual classes because they're not staying on top of their coursework. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind. For Georgia Virtual, same deal. We're going to block their classes either in the morning, afternoon, or bookend. Students need to have transportation to come in late or leave early. It's self-paced, but there are more periodic deadlines throughout the semester that help keep a student on track to finish the coursework. So although students love the freedom, they actually perform better in GAVs due to the more structured pacing. It keeps them on track. There's no option for them to let it build up to where a student is doing an entire semester's worth of coursework online at the end of a semester. And then the last option is dual enrollment. The dual enrollment information night is January 26th at 6 p.m. in the Milton Auditorium. I'll be there, as will all the other counselors, and that's where we'll be sharing information on who is eligible, what does the application process look like, how are those classes funded, what colleges can your student choose. I do want to share on the front end that this is optional. and it is optimal for students who are extremely responsible. So dual enrollment quite literally means that a student is enrolled in high school and a student is now enrolled in college. They are enrolled in two completely different schools, and they have to balance that. They have to balance talking with teachers at two different schools. There is a counselor in college, otherwise known as an advisor. So they have to work with their advisor and their high school counselor. They have two school emails that they need to monitor. Those are things that, you want to keep in mind when pushing your student to do a college class. If you find yourself wanting your student to do dual enrollment, but then they won't do the application and they won't read the website and they don't do their paperwork, I think that's a good first indicator that your student is probably not a good candidate for dual enrollment. Another reason why we want to be careful about who we push into this dual enrollment program is that your student's college GPA begins when they start taking dual enrollment courses. They are starting off with a dual enrollment transcript, which is a college transcript. So if your student fails college English and they have an F on their college transcript, they quite literally have a 0.0 GPA. And then when they apply to their colleges and the college says, hey, we require transcripts from all of your schools, they're going to have to send in that college transcript to them that has a 0 GPA on it. So we really strive to make sure that students are prepared for that and that they understand. We stick very strictly to our deadlines for everything around dual enrollment, because a dual enrollment student is supposed to be a student that is ready to do college. All of the updated paperwork and processes will be available on the counseling website on January 17th. I meant to change that. That's going to be next Tuesday because we are out on Monday. I just received the updated paperwork this week, so I'll make sure that we get that shared out next week. And then just as a disclaimer that signing up for an online dual enrollment class does not guarantee a parking pass. Only seniors are guaranteed parking, so that's really more for the rising juniors, but it does not always guarantee that you're going to get the parking pass, but your rising seniors should be fine. I want to address one of our other favorite topics, which is schedule changes. A lot of neighboring high schools don't do schedule changes at all after the spring verification process. So despite us having really limited parameters to make changes, we still feel lucky that we have the movement to make these changes. We are going to be operating under the belief that the changes and choices that students make during verification in January and February are going to be final. Those are going to be what we stick to. You will have signed off on those, acknowledging that you are also okay with that. And we do realize life circumstances pop up and things change, but we're not going to be operating on 1,000 students having a life circumstance that needs a schedule change. So we are going to be considering these as the final choices. We do know that some things need exceptions. So some of our extremely limited basis reasons for a schedule change in the fall and in the middle of next year are going to be if your student needs a course to graduate. If your student realizes, oh my goodness, I didn't take health over the summer, I also forgot to sign up for it, we will obviously make that change so that they can get their final graduation requirement. If a student needs an additional course for college admission, then we are absolutely going to allow that. I know a lot of colleges in California require an art credit, and a lot of students might not realize that until they're researching colleges and say, hey, I really want to go to this California school. I didn't plan to have an art, but now I need one. We'll work with them on that. If a student wants to drop a course for the senior reduced course load, they can. That's only one class per semester. We don't have a format where seniors can just take only the classes they need to graduate. Fulton County requires they take 5 classes per semester. There is a separate form that requires a parent signature for that. And if you're interested in it, we have those available in the counseling suites. Your student can pick one up and start to look it over. It will essentially be the same for next year, minus the dates on the paper. If your student earned a 70 or lower in a course and is requesting to change that class or to drop down in rigor, maybe if it's an honors class and they want to go to on level, this applies to all grades. We don't want to see a student move forward in a class that they failed the first semester of. It's not a good indicator that they'll be successful in the second semester. We don't want to cause undue stress to your student because they're not prepared with the foundations to be successful. A lot of times for a senior specifically, it will come down to graduation requirements and how much time in their schedule they have to fix something if they did fail it. We do find that even though a student might not want to take the second half of chemistry their senior year, they need that to graduate as a fourth science, so they stay in it, and then they just do chemistry A, which is the fall semester, and credit recovery. So it does get a little bit more student specific when it comes to senior year because it's all about getting across that finish line and graduating. If a student has not taken and passed a prerequisite course, for example, Intro to Art has to be taken before any other art class. If a student accidentally finds their way in a class that has a prerequisite, the teacher typically emails us, and then we have to pull them out and put them in the prerequisite or a different elective. If a student has not displayed the skills to continue in a year-long course and the teacher is recommending that they drop down in rigor, that's something that we will also have as a discussion between the teacher and the counselor and the student. In an effort to avoid parents asking the teacher to just recommend that the kid gets dropped, we almost always ask for a conference so we can talk about what's really going on in that class and then determine what the best action is after that. If your student has an incomplete schedule, we will fix it. If your student has duplicate classes or obvious errors, we will fix it. If your student has an IEP and has been left out of a class that they need services in, or if they've been dropped in a class with services incorrectly, we will fix it. And then lastly, if your student has an ELL placement error, we will fix that. That's an English language learner, which means if your student gets put in a class without the appropriate support, we will fix that. I do want to remind everyone that any schedule change request that does not meet the criteria is subject to denial. These are just that, they're requests. You are receiving the opportunity to pick everything that you want, so we're trying to stick to that. Full year courses are full year commitments. I do want to reiterate that a lot of times, some of the reasons we hear for students wanting to get out of classes could be used as learning opportunities. A lot of students want to get out of a class because it's hard. They want to get out because they don't like the teacher. They want to get out because they can't understand the teacher. And I think that these are all opportunities for your student to learn and grow, and see that they can do hard things. They can do that class that is a little bit difficult and maybe requires a little bit of extra time outside of school. They can work with that teacher who might be a little bit difficult or somebody that they don't really vibe with. They can work through not understanding a teacher because when they go to college, they're going to experience that. And we have a duty as counselors and as people who are stakeholders in these students' lives to teach them how to work through these things and how to cope when they're in these situations and not just pull them out so that they're not learning how to get through and do those hard things. I do want to reiterate that we don't permit students to sign up for online classes after we do registration in the fall or in the middle of the year. And then we also don't permit students to move from online to in-person after registration in the fall or mid-year. This slide is our course catalog links and links to other helpful resources. We have our Milton course catalog linked. That is in the process of being updated. Teachers are submitting updated blurbs to us so that we can update that, and we hope to have it finished and uploaded at this link by February 6th when students get their verification form. So right now it's the current year's course catalog, but we're hoping to have next year's uploaded by February 6th. I've shared the current school year course catalog for Fulton Virtual and Georgia Virtual. Those next year course catalogs probably won't be released until around April, but for the most part, they are the same classes every year, so you can at least get an idea of what's typically offered at those schools. We have AP fact sheets, which is something that our previous head counselor initiated last year. These are individual sheets. There's one for every class, every AP class that we offer. And on those sheets, there's a direct link to the College Board website for that AP class so that you can look at practice tests, you can look at the curriculum flow, you can see what kind of material your student is going to be expected to learn based on the AP curriculum. There will also be Milton-specific feedback on the fact sheet that has teachers sharing how long students are expected to spend on this class outside of school, what the class looks like, and then for those classes that provided it, student feedback on how it compares to other AP classes at Milton. So we are going to be updating those as well. We also plan to have those updated by February 6th so that students can use these as a resource to either pick or change their mind about an AP class that they're wanting to take next year. We do get a lot of questions about athletics and clubs, so I've linked both of their pages. Both of those links have charts that list the coach and sponsor and their contact information. So if you're not sure who to go to for what, those are very helpful. And then at the end, our counseling website, which we're really proud of and partial to believing is the best resource. Our department has worked really hard to make sure that we have all of the information that you could ever want on there. If you ever feel like there's something that you would like to see, feel free to email me at popwellt@fultonschools.org. I'm happy to add things to the website if you feel like you could use it, but you will find everything from mental health resources to signing up for college visits. You'll find Hope and Zell Miller information. All of the junior advisement materials, which you did this year, are listed on there. That's where you make appointments to meet with the counselor, or students do, but at the very least, you can see our contact information. So if you haven't really taken time to look through it, highly, highly recommend that. And then lastly, the next important date that we see coming up is January 26th. That's the dual enrollment information night, 6 to 8 p.m. in the Milton Auditorium. If your student is not interested in dual enrollment, that is totally fine. You do not have to come. We do ask that you stay connected with us. We have Miss Rhodes is wonderful on our social media. She's done a great job building our following. It's super informative. We have new posts going out almost daily. We have our Twitter, our Instagram, and then our YouTube, which this presentation will be posted to shortly. We have our Milton High School website, and then we have the counseling website again. And then now I want to open it up for questions. I think that there's just a few of us here tonight, and it's probably due to weather, which is completely understandable. I'm sure that questions will come in later. If you know someone who couldn't make it and wants this presentation, just tell them it will be posted on the counseling website. Since I'm already home, I will get that up as soon as it processes and uploads. So does anyone have any questions? Because I don't have any additional information to share. This is just kind of an introduction so that nobody feels blindsided or not prepared for the processes that are about to come up. And I just also want to share how important these processes are to take part in so that you get the opportunity to make the changes with everyone else. Will counselors discuss dual enrollment with students? Yes, counselors can discuss dual enrollment. We're all trained in dual enrollment, so if they have generic questions, they can ask. But I would say come to the parent night on January 26th, and I think that you'll get a ton of information from that and probably won't need to meet with a counselor. And like I said, we'll all be there, and that will also be recorded, or we will record a voiceover and share that presentation the day after. I see, can a student take AP seminar for an English credit? So that one is a great question. In the state of Georgia and for university system of Georgia schools, they accept it as a fourth English. I know that for my caseload in the past, whenever I was advising them about using AP seminar as a fourth English, I would say if your student thinks that they might go out of state for college, to not depend on that as a fourth English credit, because a school in California might look at AP seminar and say, we don't really think that's an English, but we still require four. And then your student doesn't have four English credits and then can't go to that college. So if you're staying in state, you're safe to use that as a fourth English. But if you're going, even potentially going out of state, I would build in a fifth year of English for your student. If a student does not have art, can they take it over the summer? Yes. Fulton Virtual and I believe Georgia Virtual have Intro to Art. Fulton Virtual summer class is $225 and for a half credit, and then a half credit for a GAVS class, I believe, is $250. But art is not required for Georgia school. I mean, really what I would do is make sure your student looks at the admissions page of their dream school to see what that college needs, because if they don't want art, then there's really no need to take it. All right. Well, I think that concludes our session. If anyone doesn't have any additional questions, you can go ahead and log off and we'll stop the recording. But I do appreciate those of you who made it. I do hope it was helpful. This will be on the website. Please share it with others. Please reach out with questions if anything was unclear. We're always listening and we are always working to make our department a better service for you. So, we just want to continue to reiterate that we are listening and we do our best to help you. Thank you so much. I do have time for a non-senior question. I'm going to turn the recording off. That way it's not a super personal on the one that goes out to the community.